Our next guest is here to weigh in on the budget bill talks in Washington, U.S. trade, and much more. Joining us right now is former New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu. And, Governor, thanks for coming in
today.
You bet.
Thanks for having me.
All right, we've seen the House version. Now the Senate is out with its version.
Which is very different.
I was going to say, they did not leave things alone like the House Speaker had kind of been begging them. Don't change this because we have such a thin majority. I'm not going to be able to get it back through. Some of the big changes, SALT deductions back to $10,000 from the $40,000 that the Senate put in. Whether you think it's a good idea or not, can it get passed in the House with this?
Not the way it is right now. And the SALT deductions, I think, would last. Those were really only pushed up because some of the blue state Republicans really wanted that. But I think that will hold. The Medicaid stuff, it's actually not as bad as it probably could have been. It does cut like... In terms of reducing what they call, it's so technical, the FMAP on the expansion. So they were going to take the 90% share that the federal government gives to states and reduce that to 50. They ended up not doing that because that really would have cut like 20 million people off. The work requirements, I think, are going to be fine. It's the tax piece, I think, which is really interesting because what holding on and strengthening the tax cuts and making them permanent, what it showed me was this is a bill that's focusing on the market more than anything else. It just wants to, they really just want to make sure that the economy is strong more than anything. They're not going for significant reductions. It's going to add a lot of money into our debt, which drives people like me absolutely bonkers. So again, will it pass in the House? No. There's going to have to be a kind of a long reconciliation. It will pass eventually, but there's going to have to be a meeting of the minds in September. But it is a market-driven bill more than anything. It's really not there to cut costs. It's really there to boost up the market. And, you know.
So it aggravates the people who are concerned about pushing our deficits to higher levels. If you look at somebody like Elizabeth Warren, she's saying House Republicans voted to kick 16 million people off their health care today. Senate Republicans proposed bigger cuts to Medicaid. Call your senator. So you're going to have people coming at it from all sides.
Yeah, look, work requirements are work requirements. And expanded Medicaid was designed for people that could work. So all they're saying is we need to just codify that more than anything. Will some people say, well, I'm not working, and so I guess I'm not going to have my Medicaid? Yeah, that's going to happen because those people are effectively choosing not to work. The devil's in the details. Does a single mom have to have a work requirement? How many hours a week? What is part-time work okay? What they're going to look at is Georgia, I think it was Georgia and Arkansas, right, tried work requirements. One was overturned in the courts. Georgia's is kind of still in a temporary experimental phase. Some of it's working, some of it isn't. You're going to need a whole bureaucracy just to manage that, by the way. We tried a beta test of it in New Hampshire. It was very complicated.
What did you try in New Hampshire?
We basically said, okay, we're going to, if we were to institute work requirements, how hard would it be? We had people going door to door because, by the way, no one answers their phone. No one responds. So the question is, are you going to kick someone off a work requirement just because they didn't respond to your survey, right? Or are you going to force them to come in and reapply, almost like unemployment? You could do that. But you need a law to back that up. Otherwise, you're going to lose in court when you kick someone off and it's technically unwarranted. We just found it incredibly a big bureaucratic mess. Luckily, we had very low unemployment. We have the lowest Medicaid rates in the country in New Hampshire.
So
it wasn't a big crisis.
What's your solution, having tried that on a smaller scale?
The solution is to do it, but be prepared for the costs that come with it. The states are going to have to put up a lot of money in hopefully a fairly simple system to make sure that it's in place. And again, make sure that it can be defended in court, because everyone's going to take you to court. I mean, that's the other thing. All this is going to be held up for years, potentially, in court battles all across the country.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a problem. And that's why I always say, if you're going to have these problems, then have real problems and really make cuts. Look at actually cutting the deficit. Look at bringing these rescission bills forward. What are the deals you're going to cut to get the rest of the conservative House Republicans on board? And my sense is they're going to say, vote on this bill, and we'll give you these DOGE cuts, these rescission bill cuts later this fall. And there's going to be some backdoor dealing.
Some trading.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of trading. But if you're in the market, you should be very happy with this bill. It's going to these tax cuts are going to prop up the economy. Maybe even get a rate cut, later this fall. I think that's probably likely at some point. And then, that's going to be matched with, I think, weak job numbers. Come September, October, November, you're looking at some pretty weak job numbers as all these federal employees that have walked away, but technically they're not off the rolls till September. Those are going to skyrocket in October, November. So it's a bit of a balancing act, knowing that we're going to have some weak economic data. Not a recession, but some weak economic data coming down the road.
How will that read into how people take these tax cuts? Because that's the battle that you have taking place right now. Will you get higher growth or will you not? Because that will decide how much of the deficit is pushed into.
Well, you'd want to hope
levels.
that the business sectors are really being reinvested back into the economy, right? And what Wall Street does with the tax cuts is different than what Main Street does.
Yeah, and there's so many moving pieces. I mean, if you're looking for a clear experiment so that you can say, from an economic perspective, this is the way to do it. You've got that. You've got tariffs that are floating around in the meantime. You don't know how the Fed is going to react on these things.
That's right.
It's not going to be a clean and easy experiment.
It's not going to be clean and easy at all. And a lot of the burden, again, will fall to the states. Remember, most folks in Washington don't even understand how Medicaid works. I mean, they really don't. It's a federally assisted program, but always run by the states. Anything run by Washington, if you noticed, isn't being touched. Medicare, Social Security, defense, they're not touching
complicated.
Any of this.
So the states can tax hospitals, and then they get reimbursed by the federal government for the taxes. So if they can tax...
The equivalent of SALT, right?
If they can tax hospitals at a greater rate, then they get a greater reimbursement. So that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to lower the rate.
They're lowering the rate, yeah. So we'll get even...
Would that hurt? Right now, Medicaid is kind of the fallback for a lot of people who can't get health care, but it's not a good way to do it because it's very expensive.
That's right.
Is there a way to fix that and to replace it with something that would save money? Or
no,
what do we do with a problem like Medicaid? What do we
simplify it. So the biggest problem with Medicaid is it is so complex. There's like 1,500 codes, 10-digit codes that people have to put in. And the complication of Medicaid isn't just a hospital. It's all the nonprofits that do drug recovery programs, mental health programs. These are small providers that can't...
It's after-school chess courses and crazy uses for what states do.
There's crazy uses for it. So they have to massively simplify it so that you don't have all that waste, fraud, and abuse. And it's less on the fraud side and most on just people don't understand the system and you get massive misbilling. One of the most common things we had in New Hampshire was folks just coming to us saying, help us understand how to use the system. And it would take 6 months to a year sometimes to train these folks. So it's so massively complicated at a federal level that the locals really screw up, frankly. And so that's it. And it sounds like a small problem, but believe me, it is a billions of...
take it. It becomes a serious problem for who will even accept it.
Look, my theory is anytime Washington gets involved in anything at the state level, it's overly complex, right? Because you can't have a one-size-fits-all. So the best thing to do is make it crazy simple. I just keep going back to that. And as a governor, I can tell you every single governor, red and blue state alike, deals with this. And so unless you're bringing those simplifications, it's almost like the tax code. Unless you're going to kind of a wholesale reform of the system can work and can do what it's designed to do, but you really need those wholesale reforms. And again, no one in Washington really understands how it works.
Does anybody listen to you when you say these things?
No, they just look at what does it cost, how many people are on, okay, we'll kind of judge the system on the taxes, and that's it, as opposed to really understanding at a grassroots level. And that's why they kind of just do these wholesale cuts without really understanding the implications. That's why they don't touch Medicare, by the way, because Medicare is their system. And there's another one that is just so massively complicated. How much does a hospital stay in New York nowadays? A one-night hospital stay in New York, well over $50,000 per night, right? That's like minimum. That's minimum. That's if you want like a colonoscopy and you have to stay overnight. $50,000. That makes no sense, right? Yeah. But that's the driver, and that's where your tax dollars and all your viewers' tax dollars are going.
Where are we spending pre-pandemic to now? Where did we increase spending to where we can't possibly get back there?
So from pre-pandemic to now, you saw a massive increase on the Medicaid rolls, and then you had the federal government.
So it's Medicaid still.
Right, and then you saw everyone kind of coming down off of those Medicaid rolls. So the spending itself, the number of people on Medicaid has only gone up very slightly since
overall government spending prior to the pandemic and now. Most of that is Medicaid, the increase.
Medicaid and Medicare, Social Security. Those are the three that just keep skyrocketing. These guys are going after discretionary spending, which is great, but it's a fraction of the problem. The real big issues, they're all afraid to touch. It's not that they don't think it's a problem. They've all said it. I mean, when Nancy Pelosi says Medicare is full of waste, fraud, and abuse, and no one does anything about it, that should wake everybody up.
And I think knows how to fix it. Maybe that is something that you can help out with in Washington.
How much are they paying? Look, I don't mean to be so brash, but obviously I am. You really could fix this in about 2 months if you had the political will to do it. But they're all afraid. Even Josh Hawley was out there saying, to touch Medicaid is political suicide.
Right.
Who am I talking? I thought you were Republican. Like, what are we talking about here, right? So, again, at the end of the day, there's a fiscal car crash that is coming in about 8 years, right? Social Security starts to go bankrupt. Medicare starts to go bankrupt. Debt hits about $42 trillion. Our interest rate payments go from $1 trillion a year to what, $1.3 trillion a year? Yeah. So in 9 years or so, guys, massive car crash. You need to pump the brakes before you come to the hit, right? So I wish folks in Washington would just have the courage to do it. They know it's coming, but they're just assuming they'll keep kicking the can down the road.